Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Terumot. We're up to Perik Gimel Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnah should be Nishmat Neria ben Svetlan Aranbayev and Eliyahu ben Barucho Israel of Minuchatam Began Eden. Amen. Today's Mishnah is going to discuss a new law that the portions separated from produce have to be designated in a specific order, and the order is like this. First you separate Bikurim, then Terumah Gedolah, then Maaser Rishon, and then Maaser Sheni or Maaser Ani, depending on which year in the 7-year cycle it is. Bikurim, we know, the Torah tells us in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 26, Pasuk 1 and Pasuk 11, Bikurim are the first fruits that ripen each year of the 7 species of produce for which Eretz Yisrael is praised. Wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. The owner must bring his bikurim to the Beit HaMikdash, where he performs a certain ritual with them and gives them to a Kohen. Now, the biblical source for this order is going to be presented in the next Mishnah. And if you notice, one of the separations is missing from this order, Terumat Maaser. And the reason Terumat Maaser is not included in the sequence, the Mefarshim say, is because its separation is not the responsibility of the original owner of the produce, but of the Levi to whom the Maaser Rishon is given. Our Mishnah now is going to discuss what happens if one does not follow this order. Hamagdim Terumah LaBikurim. If someone designated Terumah before Bikurim, Maaser Rishon LeTerumah, or Maaser Rishon before Terumah, or Maaser Sheni LaRishon, or Maaser Sheni before Maaser Rishon, Afal Pishu Over Belo Taaseh, even though he violates a biblical sin, the Mishnah says, Masha Asa Asui. What he did is done. The separation is valid. Shenemar, how do we even know there's a prohibition to do this? The source for the prohibition is in Sefer Shemot, chapter 22, Pasuk 28, Meleatecha v'dim'acha lo te'acher. Do not delay your bikurim or your terumah. Meaning, the Rav tells us, you shall not designate these portions of bikurim and terumah too late, meaning after their correct position in the order. The same is true of Maaser Rishon. Now, the word Meleatcha literally means your fullness portion. It refers to Bikurim, which are the first fruits of the crop to become full, which means to ripen. The word Dim'acha means your liquid portion. It is used in reference to Terumah as a way to contrast it with Bikurim, since Terumah for grapes and olives can always be taken from liquid, meaning from their wine and oil, whereas bikurim must usually be brought in their solid form, meaning the olives and grapes themselves. The verse's reference to terumah includes Maaser Rishon, because Maaser Rishon contains in it terumat maaser, which is a type of terumah. Therefore, the pasuk is prohibiting delaying any of these portions, which means designating it later in the sequence than it should be. The pasuk does not refer to Maaser Sheni or Maaser Ani, for since this is the last portion to be separated, its designation cannot be delayed. In fact, the Mefarshim say, one who separates portions out of the required sequence violates not only the negative commandment, whose source is presented in this Mishnah, but also the positive commandment to follow the correct order, whose source is going to be brought down in the next Mishnah. And that is Rabotai of Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Zayin now is going to explain how we know that the portions must be separated in the order that we said in the previous Mishnah, which was Bikurim, Terumah, Maaser Rishon, and then Maaser Sheni / Maaser Ani. Uminayin shekdemu Bikurim LaTerumah, and from where do you know that Bikurim should be separated for Terumah? Ze karui Terumah v'reshit, v'ze karui Terumah v'reshit. After all, what's the Mishnah's what's the Mishnah's argument for this point? This Bikurim is called by the Torah Terumah and first, and that Terumah is also called Terumah and first by the Torah. So what's the difference between them? And the Mefarshim explain what the Mishnah is saying in depth. The Torah describes Bikurim as Terumat Yadecha, the Terumah of your hand, in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 12, Pasuk 17, and as Reshit first in Sefer Shemot, chapter 23, Pasuk 19. However, these two sources would not be enough to teach that Bikurim come first, because the Torah uses the same terms with respect to Terumah as well. Terumah is called Terumotai, my Terumot, in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 18, Pasuk 8, and it's described as Reshit Ganecha, the first of your grain, in Dvarim, chapter 18, Pasuk 4, so they share the same names. of Terumah in first. Nevertheless, bikurim should be separated first. The Mishnah says, Shen bikurim lakol, because their very name, bikurim, literally means first ones, implies that they are the first ones of all. The Torah says in Sefer Shemot, chapter 23, pasuk 19, it uses the words bikurim, first ones, to teach that they should be designated before all of the other portions. Now, what's the source for separating Terumah before Maaser Rishon? Utrumah leRishon, and Terumah comes before Maaser Rishon. Shei Rishit, because Terumah is called first by the Torah and Maaser Rishon is not. Right? The word Terumah appears not only regarding Terumah, but also regarding Maaser Rishon. If you look in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 18, pasuk 24, you'll see the Torah called Maaser Rishon also Terumah. However, the Torah states first only in reference to Terumah and not in reference to Maaser Rishon. Now, what's the source for separating Maaser Rishon before Maaser Sheni? Maaser Rishon Sheni, the Mishnah says, and Maaser Rishon comes before Maaser Sheni, sheyesh bo reshit, because Maaser Rishon contains Terumat Maaser, which can be called first because of its form of Terumah. And the Rambam says in his Hilchot Terumot, chapter 3, halakha 23, that likewise in years where Maaser Ani is separated, Maaser Rishon must be designated before it. And that is in Rabotai, today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.